Welcome to Four Muse. I am Patrizia Fanucchi, and I am going to read you a famous poem by Sylvia Plath called Mirror. Mirror by Sylvia Plath. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. The eye of a little God, four-cornered. Most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is a part of my heart. But it flickers, faces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candles and the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me she has drowned a young girl, and in me an old woman rises towards her day after day, like a terrible fish. It is interesting that as a young child, Sylvia Plath was fascinated by and indeed longed to enter into a mirror as Alice in Wonderland did. Unbeknown to her at the time, the image of the mirror would, and indeed reflections, would become a central image in much of her poetry and also in her novel, The Bell Jar. What are the implications of this image in Mirror? It immediately becomes clear that the persona is the mirror, personified. And the poem begins with a calm, neutral tone, detached, objective, precise, almost perfect. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Line 2, however, immediately suggests a more sinister tone. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately. And as the poem continues, it is as if the very act of looking in the mirror diminishes the value of the woman as the mirror devours her image, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. Although in stanza 1, the mirror claims that it is supremely objective, and it insists that it is not cruel. The truth is that it wields infinite power over the woman. The mirror is seen as the eye of a little God, four-cornered, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful, and perhaps even worshipped. The mirror hangs on the wall in a domestic space, the home. Most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it for so long, I think it is a part of my heart. Ironically, the mirror has no heart, no emotions, no feelings. The mirror portrays the unfeeling male view of a woman and what he expects of her, the stereotypical expectations imposed on her by society, to possess an idealized beauty and an everlasting youth. This attitude was quite common in 1961 when Sylvia Plath wrote Mirror. Sylvia Plath was only 29 years old at the time. Clearly, he isn't as supremely objective as he pretends to be. In fact, advertisements in the 1950s and 1960s often portrayed women as being confined to the kitchen. They were most often excluded from life beyond domestic spaces. This, typically, was largely the domain of men. Stanza 1 ends with flickers of light across the mirror as faces and darkness separate us over and over. This implies that the woman returns to the mirror every day, almost compulsively, as time passes irrevocably. In stanza 2, the mirror becomes a liquid space. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. She seems to be searching her reflection in the depth of the lake to discover who she really is, to find her true identity. The mirror is presented as self-righteous, as if it stands on moral ground for the truth. It judges and criticizes the woman for turning towards the softer lights, those liars, the candles, and the moon. It claims to portray the truth, but the implication is that it represents the patriarchal perception of a woman. She is only valued for her beauty and her youth as a decorative object. It is this harsh and cruel reality that is implicit in the woman's reaction to her own reflection in the lake. Unlike the myth of Narcissus, who falls in love with his own reflection in the lake, and he cannot tear himself away and languishes there until his death. By contrast, the woman is troubled and upset by her reflection in the lake. The choice of words ascribed to the mirror is telling. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. The word rewards implies a certain glee or satisfaction in her agitation. In Go Lovely Rose by Edmund Waller, we only have the male voice instructing a rose to warn the beautiful young woman he wishes to seduce that time passes quickly and her beauty will fade. He says that she should suffer herself to be admired while she is still young and beautiful. By contrast, in Mirror, the male voice is ostensibly and notably absent. Yet, as we analyze the poem more closely, we realize that the mirror isn't as neutral as it appears to be. We see this in the woman's tears and in her agitation of hands. The poem intensifies in meaning as the tension increases. Stanza 2 develops the image of light and darkness, following each other as time passes, relentlessly and irrevocably. This is noted in the mirror's voice. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Then, just as in stanza 1, each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. And there is a growing realization of just how inevitable the aging process is. The woman finds this process terrifying and monstrous as she watches the old woman herself getting closer and closer as the poem moves steadily to its climax. In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises towards her day after day like a terrible fish. She is utterly repelled by the ugliness of the aging process. She is terrified by this, and in this she echoes the patriarchal male gaze. And yet, in searching the depth of the lake for her true identity, there is a hint that we may see the mirror and the lake as liminal spaces. The forceful conclusion of the poem may be seen as engendering, in embryonic form, the power to transform and to free the self from patriarchal perception. The words drowned a young woman are rather disconcerting, as we know that Sylvia Plath, born in 1932, faced many challenges growing up. Her father died in 1940 when she was 8 years old, and this had a profound effect on her. She didn't have a good rapport with her mother. Despite being a brilliant student who won a Fulbright scholarship and went to Cambridge in 1955 at the age of 22, at a time when it was mainly male students at university. We know that she attempted suicide. In addition, she ultimately had a tumultuous marriage to Ted Hughes, a fellow poet whom she met at Cambridge. They separated in 1962, the year after she wrote Mirror, and she went to stay in London with her daughter Frieda and her son Nicholas. Although the last year of her life was creatively important for her, she published 2 poetry collections and 1 novel, The Bell Jar. She committed suicide in 1963. Apparently, she threw open the window of the children's bedroom, leaving it open. She left bread and milk beside their cots, carefully taped the cracks in their door, pushed cloths and towels under it, and then gassed herself in an oven. Her life, however, is far more significant than her tumultuous marriage and her tragic suicide. She is now recognized as having had a significant impact on 21st century poetry. The poem Mirror is carefully structured in 2 stanzas of precisely 9 lines each, enhancing the notion of mirror and reflection. Please remember to click the bell below and subscribe for more poetry.